Welcome to Tusoka.
Two sisters of a certain age, conversations with a therapist and a doctor. I am Judy Grant, licensed marriage and family therapist.
And I am Dr. Sophia Grant, board certified pediatrician and child abuse doctor.
It's so good to be back with everybody. We're super excited to bring you this episode. There's going to be a lot of great information, so just hold on for a minute. Before we get into that, Candy, what's going on?
Well, last night, as I was going to bed, I turned on my alarm, I locked my door, had my heat. Well, I don't want anybody to think I have a gun. I got to stay packing.
Oh,
I
no.
I had my taser at my bedside and I went to bed and I'm like, damn, it's tough to kind of live in fear.
I think it's just that we feel vulnerable. We don't know what's going on out in the world, but we know that there's a lot of bad stuff and it gets us fearful and apprehensive about how to protect ourselves, how to keep ourselves safe rather. And just this week Maya, my second daughter who's in college, she shared that she was going out for the evening with some friends. And I said to her, "Do you have your taser? Do you have your pepper spray? Be observant. If you feel uncomfortable, get out." I was so concerned for her physical safety. So that's not just an issue that women of a certain age are concerned about, but our young people as well.
And you know what? This is a perfect segue into our guest that we have today. Rachael Frost is going to be here and she's going to talk about staying safe and staying vigilant for women of a certain age and all people, really.
Yeah, I'm super excited to talk to Rachel and to find out the steps that we can take to stay safe.
Today, we are thrilled to have Rachael Frost, who is a retired detective and an expert in safety.
Rachel has so much incredible experience, but I have to, say 20 years as a detective in Riverside County. That is wow. I cannot even imagine the experiences that you've had throughout the course of your career, and then to be able to bring it to the public and talk about these experiences and how to keep people safe and secure at home, at work.
And, in my job, I speak with a lot of cops, and sadly, not many women are represented. So, this is a special treat. So, welcome, Rachel.
Thank you so much for having me. I must disavow first, I was definitely not a detective for 15 years. I was regular old patrol, which
Uh huh.
was awesome.
Right.
Mhm.
Regular patrol is one of my favorite things to do and for the first 5 years, and then a detective for the last 15.
Okay.
Wow.
So it was great. And then worked patrol overtime every weekend up until the end, which was my absolute privilege. I really enjoyed it.
So what is the difference between patrol and detective? Can you explain that?
So patrol is going to be somebody who you normally would see out on the streets. Now there's all different assignments in patrol. You could have somebody who's driving a black and white unit. You could have somebody who's on bike patrol, who's working at the mall, school resource officers,
Mhm.
drug enforcement teams, human trafficking teams. It just depends. Sometimes some of the special teams are patrol, which is the street cop, and a detective or several detectives all working together. And sometimes, once you get to a certain level of special teams, it's all detectives. But like our gang unit in Riverside County is all patrol. And those
Okay.
guys do an amazing job.
And then
Guys and gals.
the detectives are the one who kind of piece together crimes and figure out who done it.
Well, especially in the sheriff's department, a
Mm-hmm.
lot of patrol is doing the exact same thing
Mm.
because in a large city like let's say Los Angeles or even San Diego, your patrol officers are kind of showing up, doing all of the emergent crisis, tasks that need to be done, tactics and whatnot, and then getting kind of the lay of the land. What kind of crime do we have here? What's possible? And then many of the larger agencies will have detectives come in if
Okay.
there are cases along those lines. Like, let's say sometimes, and I'm not, of course, saying this is exactly what LA or San Diego
Mm-hmm.
does. I'm just giving an example. And even Riverside Police, for that matter, they'll come in for like domestic violence, sexual assault, robbery, homicide, things like that. Whereas in Riverside County, because we cover such a huge area,
Right.
the sheriff's department covers such a huge area. And let me make it clear, I'm retired. I'm not speaking for the
Right.
sheriff's
Uh-huh.
department. I don't want beyond coming to find me. In such a large area like that, a lot of our patrol officers, they have to handle everything from the very beginning to the very end. Now, high-end cases where there's really significant injury or obviously homicide cases or something like that, the detectives are getting called out. But a lot of times in Riverside County, detectives will come out kind of in the midst of the investigation, but will also get things after kind of the immediate stuff's done so we can follow up. Like to do, we talked about how you ran the RCAT,
Mm-hmm.
the forensic interviews and the forensic and then also the forensic exams and everything. A detective would step in and take care of scheduling those things,
Right.
attending those, right? Because our patrol officers need to be out handling calls,
Right.
Mm-hmm.
and be there, right? Because every one of us in law enforcement are built on the backs of patrol.
Right.
Because we exist when we're in
Right.
law enforcement because someone wants to call 911 and have somebody competent show up and help them, right? I mean, in general, right? And then everything else is built with prevention and additional safeties and higher investigation and everything. So I am a huge fan of our patrol officers and on every, wherever they happen to be, and huge fan of getting them training as much as we
Right.
can.
Right.
Because I really do feel like the majority of our folks, if they know what to do, they're going to do it.
Right.
But what happens? We give them training front end, and then we don't give them as much,
Right.
as they go. So
Right.
I'm a huge believer in training, absolutely, without a doubt.
I'm in my mid 50s, and I have to say, sometimes I really don't feel safe, and I understand myself and my limitations, and I know I can't fight off an attacker. I know, like, with my skills, I don't have any kung fu skills, but I was hoping that you would be able to talk to
No
uh
kung fu fighting.
yeah, none of that going on.
Okay.
But I was hoping you could talk to us a little bit about how women of a certain age can feel safe navigating in your home, at work, when you go to the mall, that type of thing. Can you just kind of talk us through what you would recommend?
Absolutely. So I think one of the biggest things is as we get older, of course, we're just not as fit as we were. And I
Mm-hmm.
don't mean like even if you're working out and doing everything we're supposed to do and eating healthy. I mean, I'm 53, so
Mm-hmm.
I can speak to that as well. I'm not as in shape as I used to be.
Right.
We just whether we're male or female,
Right.
right? We're just not able to handle what we were able to handle before.
Right.
We're not climbing that fence to get out of here necessarily, or things along those lines. But especially as a woman, and I think whether you're young or older or middle aged, whatever it happens to be, we have a different perspective on safety than men do
Mm-hmm.
because we're targeted more than men. And I don't mean to negate any of the safety concerns that men have, not at all. But right now we're talking about females, so we're going to focus on that. I think one of the biggest things for all of us is awareness. Awareness is the biggest friend we can have, no matter what age we are. For example, my sister, who's about my middle sister, there's three of us, three girls. Oh my God. My middle sister would call me from Florida when she was at the University of Miami. And then afterwards, she's in marketing now.
Mm-hmm.
And she'd be calling me in the morning. She's coming home from the club, and she's going back to her apartment. And I'd be like, where are you right now? She said, well, I'm in the parking lot. I'm like, what are you doing talking to me?
Right.
Pay attention to what you're doing. I'm like, you keep me on the phone. Let me know what parking lot you're in and put your phone in your pocket so that if anything happens, I can call.
Right.
Yeah, but I need to know where you are. Right. But the fact that she's paying attention to the conversation.
Right.
Right.
She's not looking around. The majority of the time things surprise us.
Right.
That's what's so unsafe is we're surprised. And we don't prevent a lot of what we can prevent, right? And that's not to say, oh, blame a victim. Never. It's never that person's fault because someone else made a horrific decision, right? But we can look at our environment and say, what's a safer way for me to do this,
Mm-hmm.
right? Gavin DeBecker, who is a threat assessment consultant and executive protection agency and an individual, but Gavin DeBecker and Associates. But Gavin DeBecker has a book, The Gift of
The
Fear.
give I have
Great
it.
book. A lot of people
I
probably have read it, right?
Yeah, I have. Yeah, yeah.
Right?
Great book. Mm-hmm.
I love that book. But I think one of the key takeaways for me in that book, because I do training across the United States and I like to talk to individuals, but I always recommend that book. I get nothing out of it, but I think it's a great book
Right.
because it's about awareness. And it's also about one of the key takeaways was when he talked about a woman who walked into her apartment and she said something felt different. And then someone attacked her and she was sexually assaulted.
Mm-hmm.
And turned over with her, like, hey, what felt, I didn't know what felt different, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Deconstructed it. She realized something was wrong with her environment because as she walked in, there was a breeze and the window was open and her window's never open. She never experiences a breeze. So she couldn't really articulate it, but she knew, right? She knew that something was wrong with her environment. And I'm gonna kind of connect that to another component in the book, which is when we get on elevators,
Mm-hmm.
with for whatever reason that person's making us feel unsafe. Maybe it's because it's 10 o'clock at night and there's no one else in the building where we're working, and there's a guy on the elevator who gives us a feeling of fear
Mm-hmm.
for
Right.
whatever reason, right?
Right.
And we got to deconstruct why does that, and maybe it's just because he's a guy in an elevator,
Right.
Yeah.
right? That could be it.
Right.
And you're alone. But our politeness gets in the way of our safety.
Right.
We
So
don't want to
true.
seem like we don't want to offend that stranger.
Right.
Right.
And I say all the time, be kind, be respectful, but let your freak flag fly.
Yeah.
Right? You are allowed to be you 100%. And as long as you're kind and respectful about it, until they give you a reason not to be, right, ladies? Because
Yeah.
that's where we're going to talk about that fighting capacity. It's not so much about going to self-defense classes. It's about thinking, don't get me wrong, there's a lot of value in going someplace and figuring out how to punch and pull and poke and
Right.
bite.
And it
And all
makes
those things
yeah,
we
it
don't
makes you
think
feel
about, right?
empowered too.
Well, and but I don't like anything that's like, do this move, do that move,
Right.
right? We're not going to, unless you're practicing that every day,
Right.
Sure.
even in the police academy, right? We're
Mm-hmm.
not going to remember those things, right? But there's a lot of value in classes where if you find yourself on the ground, or if you find yourself in a situation like you have to ask yourself, what am I willing to do to get away?
Right.
And you've got to think about those things in advance, right?
Mm.
For example, because all bets are off if someone's going to hurt you or kill you,
Right.
like that, right? And I'm not talking about like, maybe a mild bar fight or something like
Mhm.
that. But when you're, someone's going to hurt you or kill you, which on a side note, the likelihood of someone hurting you that's a stranger is so much smaller to someone hurting you.
Right. Right.
That's a much bigger and a discussion we can have after this because I don't want to go too far down that rabbit hole. But if someone attacks you and they're gonna sexually assault you, you can right, you can articulate
Right.
that, or they're gonna harm you, or they're gonna try to kill you, or you don't know what's happening, right? All bets are off. Okay,
Mhm.
at
Right.
that point.
Right.
And that's where we as women have to think about those things in advance. What am I willing to do in order to get away? And then we have to play those scenarios out in our head, right? Because I used to tell my sister all the time, if someone attacks you in a dark parking lot and you feel they're going to harm you, kidnap you, take you, whatever, I'm like, and you need to, your life is in danger. I'm like, and all bets are off. I said, a lot of people talk about kneeing someone in the groin. A lot of people talk about, do this move. If they come behind you, do this and hit their foot and all these kind of things. But the reality is you've got to get physical. And
Yeah.
most women have never been in unless they've been domestic abuse survivors,
Right.
Right.
sexual assault survivors, right? The majority of us, like I played rugby in high school or college. The majority of us have not played rugby in college,
Right.
right? And rugby actually, and we're not going to do it now because I don't do it now because I break every bone in my body.
Right.
Mhm.
I play rugby right now. Right? So that's that component of understanding what we're willing to do. So I would tell her, like, if you can, you're going to take your thumb and you're going to push it through the back of that person's eye. And she would go, ah. And I said, and that right there is
Yeah.
why you're not going to get away.
Right. Right.
And I'm not saying, I want all the liability out of here. I'm not saying you guys should go out now and push it into someone's eye, right? This was a conversation I had
Right.
with my sister.
Mhm.
But if you're squeamish about whatever you're willing to do to get away,
Right.
you're not going to do it in the moment because you're going to hesitate.
Right.
We all have to kind of think along the lines of the same as first responders. So first responders are continually running scenarios through their head, right? Good first responders, right?
Right.
They're sitting there saying, when they're at a stoplight, what if a traffic accident happens in front of me? What if someone pulls up next to me and pulls out a gun?
Right.
What if this? What if that? Right? And I'll tell you, and I can only speak for myself, usually my second idea is better than my first,
Okay.
right? And so that's why you play with, like, oh, I do this. No, because that's going to put me in harm for that. Maybe I should do this instead. So that's why you do those scenarios, even as women, right? And we're constantly looking. The person with their head up, with their back straight, looking around like, I dare you, right?
Mhm.
Is not the person that's not the low hanging fruit that people are necessarily going to pick, right?
So confidence and then looking people in the eye. I have heard that if you look people in the eye, they're less likely to attack you because then you can identify them. Is that true? Like if you're in
Well,
a like
and of course, I'm not in the mind necessarily of the person who's attacking,
Mhm.
right? But they're going to want to attack someone easy to get their purse, or easy to get them, or easy to get away. And that's why oftentimes they'll pick someone who's younger, or they'll pick someone who's older, right?
Right.
Because they
Right.
don't have this level of confidence. But it's also about going back to that, being aware of your surroundings,
Sure.
that
Situational awareness.
and I'm going to situational awareness, and I'm going to give you the name of a really great website and a really great book for that. And
Okay.
she's a good friend of mine, and I love her. And you guys I highly recommend having her on the podcast as well, because she can really expand on a
Uh-huh.
lot of some of what I'm saying. Her name is Kelly Sayer, and she's at the diamondarrowgroup.com.
Okay.
And she even has some Schitt's Creek stuff on there, so it's fun too.
Okay.
But she's amazing. But that situational awareness is so important, right? Because we're overwhelmed.
Mm-hmm.
We talk about it all the time, right? Women have 1,000 browsers
Mhm.
open in our brain at all times. The biggest browser should be, am I safe where I am? Whether it is at home, in your community, in whatever mall or workplace or whatever that is, and that's about planning. So, like, let's
Mhm.
say you're in your workplace, because I do a lot of workplace training.
Mhm.
What do you have available for workplace safety? What's your parking lot look like, right? This is when we do site assessments. We take a look at your site and we say, what's the ingress and egress to the site? What's the parking lot look like? Where are the exits? Does everybody know where those are? Do they have people they can easily report concerns to, whether it's in the mall or workplace or school, right? School safety is a big thing we talk about all the time. And our teachers, right? We teach them what? We teach them run, hide, fight, right?
Right.
Active shooter or mass stuff. All that stuff is great, right? All of those things are necessary, but the prevention component is huge. And I call it death by 1,000 cuts. So knowing how to handle bullying in your environments, knowing how to handle human resources issues, knowing how to handle workplace violence, stalking, domestic violence relationships. Good leadership. Good leadership creates much safer environments, right?
Right.
Because you like where you work
People feel safe
and
to
you feel
come to you.
respected and
Mhm.
valued.
Right.
You feel much better. So while that may not seem like it's on topic for what we're talking about, sometimes women don't want to speak up, right? Guys would laugh if we said that. They're like, well, you're talking all the time.
Right.
But we don't like to speak up
Yeah.
and say, I don't feel safe, or
Yeah.
I need this.
Yeah.
And that's some of the issues that we face.
So, Rachel, let me pose a scenario for you. And you kind of mentioned this, that with your
Sure.
sister. So I teach a night class, and I typically get out of class around 9 p.m. And the first thing I do is I call my husband and I'm on the phone with him. And he kind of walks me to my car, but throughout the entire time, I do I'm observing. He's asking me who's in front of you, look behind you. He's trying to keep me on my toes as well until I'm in the car is in reverse, and I'm taking off. Is there anything else I should be doing in that sort of instance?
Well, I think it's great to also know your environment. Is there a security guard that's available in that building? Are there enough lights out in that parking lot?
Mhm,
Are there
mhm.
things we call that CPTED, crime prevention through environmental design.
Mhm.
So can you address that with the building management to say, hey, there's not really enough lights out here.
Right.
And do you have a buddy you can walk with? I mean, if you're a teacher, can you walk out with your
Your
students?
student. That's a good
Walk
You
out
want to
with
idea.
feel
my
safe with your
that's
students,
good.
right?
And
Mhm.
then should she park
Yeah,
under?
walk out in a group. Less likely to go up to a group, right?
Right.
Is
Right,
more like and everybody yell, scream, and run.
Mhm.
right,
Right? We freeze. So often we're like,
right.
because
Yeah.
we don't think about it in advance.
Right.
We've got to think about yell, scream, and run and practice it, right? I have my kids practice it. Yell,
Now,
scream, and run.
um, Judy said, when her car's in reverse. I see a lot of people reverse into their parking spots. Is that a good idea, just in case of emergency, so you can peel out?
Right. So we call that tactical, we call it tactical parking or combat parking.
Mm-hmm.
But and additionally, you get into more accidents when you're backing out. If it's an empty parking lot, shove that thing in reverse and go. Right.
Okay.
I mean, if there's no one else parked out there, it doesn't matter if you're in reverse or drive or whatever. Here's the thing: don't stop driving. Not that I can ever see this. Well, I shouldn't say ever. This would be very infinitesimal. These kind of stranger attacks, so small.
Right.
Right.
They're just so
Okay.
small in comparison to. We have more theft. Like, don't leave anything out in view in your car, in
Right.
your
Sure.
vehicle,
Mhm.
right? Don't leave our garage doors open at night. Don't, anything like that in terms of have locks on our fences. Again, crime prevention through environmental design, a little bit different when we talk about leaving valuables in cars. But, every once in a while, my son will leave his iPhone in the car. I'm like, are you kidding me?
Right,
Mm-hmm.
right.
I don't care so much about the phone, but I care about my window,
Right.
it's an old iPhone. But it also leads to maybe you got to hide a key or something like that in
Right.
your vehicle
Sure.
and somebody comes across that, or they get your address or something like that. A lot of people get worried about that. The majority of the time, that person's breaking a window, grabbing the expensive thing and running.
Yeah.
Right.
They're not taking time to look through all your stuff, right? But we get worried about it.
Right.
Yeah.
I do see that we're worried a lot about a lot of things, especially on social media, where I go, I think we're spending too much time being concerned about that.
Mm-hmm.
Like we're worrying a lot about, and don't get me wrong, it's not that it doesn't happen, but it's such a small
Right.
percentage. We're worrying a lot about human trafficking. Like I'm walking with my kid in Target, and this person's trying to steal my kid from Target. Human trafficking usually targets our. Again, I go back to the concept of it sounds terrible, but low hanging fruit, right? We're taking our kids in lower socioeconomic situations or in situations where they're looking for belonging, right?
Mm-hmm.
Desperate for someone, foster care kids, kids who are kind of left to their own devices all day, maybe
Right.
even just because mom is working two jobs or dad's working two jobs trying to support them.
Right.
Mhm. Mhm.
Those are our kids getting more often. I'm not, of course, you're always safe with your kids. I mean, I'm
Right.
like a very revolving helicopter mom myself, but worried about our kids. But in general, we're more worried in terms of human trafficking, things like that with our foster care kids or the kids that need, a place to go. Because the kid that is holding their mom's hand in Target, not that it can't happen, but how many people with the concerned, vigilant mom that's right there, how many people are going to start looking for this person?
Right.
They're going to be on them immediately
Right.
versus you can get one of these poor, which is terrible, right? And so those are the kids we're trying to wrap our services around.
Right.
And you're always on the lookout, again, situational awareness, whether you're in a store, a mall, community, school, all these different kinds of things. But we see so much on the media,
Right.
right? We're
It's
inundated
Oh,
it's
with stuff
sensationalized. Yeah.
but
Yeah.
right?
it's also frightening.
Yeah. Now, tell me something.
Well, for 100%.
A few months back, there were many home invasions in the area where I live. Is there anything that people can do to keep themselves safe in their homes? Like I have an alarm system, and I don't know how safe this is, but like at night in my bedroom, I lock my door. Is there anything else? And I have fences. Is there anything else that people can do to keep themselves safe?
So I think automatic lighting turning on or
Hmm.
lighting that you keep on all the time out at night. Um, the automatic light's great. Outdoor cameras. People
Right.
see outdoor cameras and they're like a little less. Now, don't get me wrong. We have seen, right, so many theft from a vehicle where people like, hey, this guy broke into my truck last night. Here it is on my Ring camera.
Right, right.
Call attention to the camera. Call attention to the fact that it's there. I am a huge fan of a big old dog. I know not everybody's a dog people, but that barking dog, that that real legitimate dog is a little less likely for people to go in there.
Right.
Right.
Unless they're, and again, these types of home invasions where you've got like, five guys coming in with firearms and stuff like that,
Hmm.
where they're not that worried about a dog. Such a small percentage.
Right.
Such a very small percentage of what we see. Now, still out there, right? Of
Hmm.
course. But I personally, I mean, I feel good when I go to sleep because I have two very large dogs and they're going to let me know like that,
Right.
right?
Now
Keep your phone charged. I
keep your
can't
phone charged.
encourage that enough. Or your watch, if you have a watch that connects to your phone.
Hmm.
But keep your phone charged. Have your phone at the ready, and it doesn't mean like you got to walk out like this, with your phone necessarily, but have it right there in your pocket so that you can immediately pick it up. You can immediately, use your phone to call 911 if it's in your pocket and you can't
Hmm.
get to it or whatever it happens. Or your watch again. But keep those things charged. And we're all guilty of it, right?
Right.
We all fell with it, sit in bed or whatever, and it's not charged. But having that there and being able to call for help, I've called the police. The police are on their way. Police are coming. Call the police. Really important too. And then going back to that Gavin DeBecker idea, because I don't ever want to make it think like it's mine, but that idea that if you're in an uncomfortable situation, for whatever it's uncomfortable, get out of it.
Right. Trust your
If you can
instinct.
get out of it, get out of it. Go back into the store. You see someone lurking by your car, go back in the store. Hey, go to the loss prevention and say, hey, there's someone standing by my car. I don't know why. It could be nothing, right? Because you don't
Hmm.
want to, damn, it's a
Right.
twister. But you could say, it could be nothing, but it's making me really uncomfortable.
Right.
I had a good friend in Alaska the other day who is just a dynamo in the medical industry, right? She runs a clinic and does all these different things, a child abuse specialist. And she said that the other night she was driving home very late from the clinic, and this car started to follow her, but not just follow her. And it's Alaska, so I've been to Alaska. Even in Anchorage, there's not usually that many people there
Hmm.
Right.
in the middle of the night. But the car was following her so closely that she couldn't see the headlights anymore.
Oh,
Oh,
And there's
wow.
no one else out there but two of them. And every turn she's making, it's following her, it's going with her. So she ended up calling the police dispatch and saying, hey, I don't know what's going on. I'm very uncomfortable. And they're like, meet us at our dispatch, or excuse me, meet us at the station.
Hmm.
So she pulled in. As she went to pull in the station, the guy started to get into the lane with her, and then who knows, right? Realized or whatever, and then took off.
Wow.
So that was a really smart response, right?
Right.
Right.
She didn't panic, which most of us would do, right? But she didn't panic. She was like, okay, something's happening here, right? We don't get out of our car. We don't stop driving. We don't, right? All those kind of things. Heck, I even say that to police officers. Why are you getting out of your car to shoot back? I
Right.
don't understand. It's a very large weapon you have right there. If somebody's shooting at you through your front windshield, don't get out of the car. Just
Hmm.
use it.
Mhm.
So we
Mhm.
don't get out of the car, right? And I'm not recommending, let me make it clear because we all know how some people can go down a rabbit hole, that we run over everybody, okay?
I was going to ask that.
Yeah.
But we don't necessarily always know what someone's intentions are, right? But what do we automatically go to? That they're bad,
Hmm.
right? The person's intentions are always bad. Maybe it's someone we know and we didn't recognize them. Not necessarily her situation. I think she handled it perfectly,
Mhm.
right?
Right.
She didn't try to brake check him or do anything that would make him angry, anything like that. She's like, I got to get to a safe place. I'm going to call someone to meet me there who's got the skills to deal with this. And this is where I'm going to go. Perfect response to the situation, right? And recognizing, well, it might be nothing, but I don't feel comfortable. And this is where we have to speak up, right? So I'm not saying run over everybody, but man, but I'm definitely saying don't get out of your car,
Mm-hmm.
right? You don't need to get out of your vehicle. Someone starts banging on your window to get you out of the car, drive away,
Right.
right? You're in a vehicle. Even if you're going to go up and if you got to reverse, if you got to whatever, be safe about it, right? We're not here to run people over. We're not here to hurt people. We're not here to do any of those kind of things. But to be safe, if someone wants you to roll your window down, you don't have to do that.
Right.
It's okay, right? We're so polite.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's
I
what I
know
was
I'm
about to say. We
Yeah.
have been conditioned
so polite.
to be polite. And the way my car is, like I try and go roll it down a little bit, it goes all the way down. I can't crack it. It's all these maneuvers. And politeness gets us in trouble with regard to sexual assault, workplace bullying. Well, I don't want to report this person and get this person fired.
Or I don't want to be
Well,
rude.
you're also worried what's going to happen to me if I do that.
Right,
Is it
right.
going to come back on me, right? We're always worried about everything, which is why better leadership
Uh-huh.
is to create safer environments. Because if you know what's going to happen and how you're going to be protected, you're
Mm-hmm.
more apt. And if they take these things seriously, you're more apt to say something.
Now, I have one question, and it's unlikely to happen, but it runs through my mind quite frequently. If I am home at night and I am, say, sleeping, and I get a feeling or I hear something that somebody's in the house, besides calling 911, what can I do? Do I hide in a closet? Do I say, hey, I hear, what do you do?
Why'd you say besides calling that? Like that's the first thing you're doing.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Number
Yeah. I
one.
mean, that's
And
like
it's okay.
reflex.
You can say, but so many people say, well, I don't want to bother the police. And I get it. There might be police officers going, don't tell them to bother the police with a feeling.
Mhm.
But there's a reason you have it. Right? You can say, hey, I think it's nothing, but I'm hearing some noises. I'm home alone. I'm concerned. You have your phone. You have whatever. I mean, some people have pepper spray. Some people have, firearms. Some
Mhm.
people have whatever, they might have in their house.
Taser.
Yeah, you're going to want to put yourself in a room that has a couple extra locks between you and everybody else.
Okay.
So if you're already locked, and I'm not saying you have to live under lock and key in your own
Right.
home, right? But have good locks on your windows. Have good locks on your doors. Have for the windows and the doors. There's these. If you don't put the stick in it, right? We put sticks in the windows, and the
Uh-huh.
doors, so you can't
Mhm.
open them anyway. But obviously, they can still break the
Yeah.
door or break the window. But that's going to take more time,
Right.
because then they have to climb it and they're making more noise,
Right.
or whatever, right? And you can start yelling at the top of your lungs,
Mhm.
or you can hide. It's going to be up to you, because I would hate to give a scenario like everything we've talked about here today, right? They're all different scenarios.
Right.
It's all about totality of circumstances, like what's happening in that moment. If
Mhm.
you have neighbors that live right next to you,
Mhm.
and you can start yelling and screaming, you're calling attention to yourself,
Mhm.
right? You're making a lot of noise, calling attention to yourself. And I've called the police. Get the blank out of here. I'm on whatever. And
Mhm.
some people yell. I don't want to tell anybody what to yell per se, but but letting them know, like, hey, cops are coming. My neighbors are coming. Everybody's showing up. Because you also don't know, right? And here's where there's our totality of circumstances. We talked about mental health, right? Is this someone who has, complete control of their mental health? Or are they going through an unwell mental health time?
Right.
Right? Are they
Mhm.
living? And I don't want to imply that anyone who's living with schizophrenia is going to be the person who would do something like
Right.
that. I know plenty of people living with schizophrenia who would not, right? Who would not.
Right.
Right.
But anyone who's in a mental health crisis,
Right.
Sure.
whatever it happens to be, right? Is that someone who might be under a delusion and think that you're someone else or something else?
Mhm.
Again, really doesn't happen that often. But when it does happen, right, it speaks to us, because these are the fears that we have,
Yeah.
especially as women, right? We're afraid of being attacked on the way to our car. And we've heard about people getting attacked on their way to their car. We're afraid of being attacked in our homes. And we know there's been home invasions, right? We're afraid of this and we're afraid of that, and so we see that. But we have to remember that police officers they take about 14 million arrests a year across the United States.
Mhm.
Okay. That's not calls for service. That's just arrests, right?
Right.
And so everything that we're seeing, right? And what does media say all the time? And I used to be in the media, so I can argue it. But if it bleeds, it leads,
Mhm.
right?
Uh-huh.
So as soon as we have a scary situation, we're putting it top there and we see it, we're like, oh my gosh,
Right.
This is happening again. And especially when we have property theft in our neighborhood, right? Because we'll see that much more than we will harm to individual people.
Mm-hmm.
But property theft in our neighborhood makes us feel completely unsafe because there was a stranger
Yeah.
taking our whatever it happens to be, whether it's from our car or breaking into our home at the end of the day. I am a huge fan of alarms,
Mm-hmm.
and saying that, you know, um, from someone who went to a ton of alarms that were nothing, right? On patrol, I would say 99%, 99.9% of the alarms we go to are nothing.
Mm-hmm.
It's just the fan blew or the wind blew, something happened, or maybe someone opened the back door and they just didn't call quick enough. But that 0.1%, that's what we're
Right. Right.
But an alarm that makes a ton of noise is great.
Okay.
Anything that makes a ton of noise and calls attention to the situation, including ourselves, is great. But that situational awareness component, and that's why I highly recommend Kelly to talk about situational awareness. She talks a lot about individual stuff, and I think that you guys would really enjoy
Okay.
her and her book for a lot of that. Because I come at it as well from a law enforcement perspective. She comes at it from a non-law enforcement
Right.
perspective,
Right.
which I think is always great because that's someone I have different fears than someone who hasn't been in law enforcement,
Right.
right? Because I was a defensive tactics instructor. I, know in general, how to shoot my firearm. There's police officers in our house all the time. So I have a very different perspective about walking
Right.
through a
Of
dark
course.
parking lot than other people will. Yeah.
Well, Rachel, I feel like we could talk for hours and hours. I have so many questions in my head, but I do need to be mindful of the time. Rachel, for our audience, I'd like to give you another opportunity to share a little bit about yourself. Where can people find you, reach you if they have questions? How do we get them to you?
So our podcast is Knock and Talk because
Mm-hmm.
that's what police officers do when they go to the front door. They knock. They're like, let's do a knock and talk and see if we can find out what's going on. So my podcast is with Matt Talbot, who is a psychologist out of Texas and mental health specialist, and we talk about mass homicide, mental health, domestic abuse, safer environments. We're both threat assessors and we deal with threat management, but for school and workplace safety.
Mm-hmm.
So we've got two out. One is about the motivations behind mass homicide, and then the other one, targeted violence, not just mass homicide, but targeted violence.
Mm-hmm.
For example, like the West Virginia football players.
Yeah.
And
Yes, yes.
Idaho stabbings. We talked about that
Yeah.
for a little bit.
I watched that one.
And then we also talked about communication,
Mm-hmm.
which is such a huge part of what we do in creating safer environments. So I'm at frosticed.com. So FROST.ICED.com. And it's investigation, consultation, education, development. People say, well, what do you do? I'm like, we're a violence recognition and response firm.
Mm-hmm.
So anything that would violence in terms of, the prevention, the creating better environments, the leadership components. We do expert witness work. We do investigations, high-end investigations in domestic violence, sexual abuse, stalking, strangulation cases, things like that. And then we also have our training academy. That's the education component. We'll train schools and workplaces,
Mhm.
but we also we're very passionate about training law enforcement in so many aspects. And we are very passionate about going to small towns across the United States because our smaller agencies just don't get the opportunity
Right.
to take off for 2 weeks and go to a homicide school,
Sure.
right?
Right.
So we have a 3-day school designed to at least shift their paradigm on how do I collect evidence? What am I looking for? How do I engage? How can I be more trauma informed? And we have advanced fentanyl classes, domestic violence, things like that. So that's our actionacademytraining.com. And we're super excited about that. We're in person again,
That's great.
finally.
That's great.
Right?
Well, thank you so much for the
Well,
work
thank you
that you
guys
do.
so much. I didn't get a chance to say thank you so much for having me.
Oh gosh, no, it's been our pleasure. Just in summary, let's do a summary. Rachel talked about being aware.
Mm-hmm.
She talked about fight. If you have to fight, fight. Don't be shy.
What am I willing to do to get away?
She talked about,
And think about it beforehand. You
Think
just
about it
gotta
think about it
like,
beforehand.
realistically, what would this feel like and be like?
She talked about getting a dog. Getting a dog.
Well,
Dogs are
you
helpful.
know what? That's gonna alert me before anything else.
Right,
is.
right.
That and an alarm. A dog
Yeah,
and an alarm.
a dog, an
Give you a heads up.
alarm.
But also, I think, especially for our younger audience, be mindful when you're on the phone.
Oh
You
my
know,
gosh.
keep your
Yeah.
eyes up and roaming. Don't have your head down. If you're listening to music, that's great. Listen, but you need to be aware of your environment at all times.
That's the biggest one. Being
Yeah.
aware of your environment and holding your head up and looking at people and recognizing and then asking yourself if someone's giving you the heebie-jeebies,
Right.
GBs, excuse me, ask yourself why.
Yeah.
Why is that bothering me? Oh, he's following too close. Or most people don't come up and do this, or he's hanging out in an area, he's not going in the store, he's hanging out by my car. Why
Right.
is he standing near my driver's side window? What's he doing?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, thank you
Unfortunately-
so much.
Thank
Thank you for the time. We really do appreciate it. Love talking to you, and hope we can talk again in the future.
Thank you guys so much.
Thank
All right.
you. Bye
Take care.
bye.
Have a great day.
Thank you so much for listening to today's episode of the Two Soka podcast. We ask that you like, follow, share. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us at twosokapodcast@gmail.com.
We would love to hear from you. Questions, thoughts, comments. We are here. And believe me, if you've ever felt a little unsafe or a little insecure about your environment and your surroundings, please know that
We can relate.